So my name is Brad Wetzler, and I'm a journalist, author, editor, writing coach, yoga teacher, and wear many different hats. But I'm passionate about helping people tell stories, and especially stories that that move people, that change people, that help people grow, transform, but really just to give people a powerful experience. And so today's class is I've called sort of the stories you've lived to tell. And there's a lot to talk about here. And I'm probably going to end up doing a couple of sessions on this. So I've got lots to share today. I'm going to kind of blast you for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes or so of questions. So let's go ahead and dive in. Years ago, I got a magazine assignment to go to Brazil, and I flew into Manaus, way up the Amazon. And the assignment was to, it was kind of a weird assignment. It was to live on a houseboat for a couple of weeks with a bunch of American fishermen who are obsessed with a particular kind of a fish that's in the Amazon. And it was kind of a lot of yucks. It was, it was kind of a crazy trip, but something else came from it for me, which was exposed me to something that's in our world that I was really unaware of, which is sort of, we're in places where there aren't roads. Rivers are highways, and more than highways, they're whole centers of culture. And so as we were living on this boat for a couple of weeks, we were visited by these floating grocery stores, floating hardware stores, floating doctors' offices, even, witch doctors and prostitutes too. And so, and I ended up doing a little more research about these kinds of places. And the Amazon is obviously one place. The Congo is another place. The Mississippi here in this country is another place like that. And but where I'm going with this is sort of this idea that we all have cargo, and we all have things to share with the world. Just like all these different types of people traveling up and down the rivers of the world. And so we are like cargo boats, but and stories are like cargo boats. And so, one of the first things I want to talk about today is sort of like thinking about the stories of your life as kind of a boat, a cargo boat. And, and the stories themselves are, the details of them, are important, but, they're actually, the details and the story itself is a way to convey important ideas and more than ideas, feelings to people. And weirdly, writing is really a lot about sharing, feelings. And it sounds maybe counterintuitive because there's lots of information in a story, but people tend not to care that much about really what happened to you. They care about how it made you feel, and that's a big thing to kind of shift toward. And so it's important when you write to know how you felt about an experience, and then it's just as important to know how is it that you convey this to somebody? So there's two things going on in storytelling. One is really connecting, using the circumstances of your life, using, the facts of what happened to you, and then giving the reader the experience of that. So let me just pause for a minute. So if we're like these boats, what do these boats carry? Well, they carry, our human experience. They carry our lessons learned. They carry our traumas, our victories, and they carry our unique perspectives on the world. And we all have a unique perspective. And then, like I said, they carry this deep sense of a feeling about what happened to us. So, when you see these stories as boats like this, as carriers of this information and feelings, then you start to see, everywhere in your life there's opportunities to tell a story and to share a feeling and to share a message. And for instance, I'm a travel writer, and I've had some pretty amazing experiences that are intense and at extreme places around the world. But it's just as important to know how to write about the mundane, and the mundane is powerful for people, because most of us live, when I travel, but I only travel several weeks a year, especially when I was doing this kind of work as a magazine writer. But you don't need to have extraordinary things happen to you. You need to be able to tell stories that you connect with the reader's sense of humanity. And so again, sort of this message I want to convey here is that, no one cares that much about the facts of your story. They don't care exactly about what happened to you. They care about how you felt. And in order to connect with them, then you've got to make this important shift toward the reader. And so in a way, I think of it sort of like a being a movie director. So you need to understand the feeling you want to convey, but then you also have to shift toward the reader and try to give them an experience. And so writing is so much about kind of creating a relationship with your reader. And the more you get trapped in our own little heads about, what it meant to you, the less you are, you've got to do both and. You've got to be authentic to yourself about what happened and the feelings you had. But then you've got to, think like a movie director. And a movie director is constantly like, they're not just, pointing the camera at the things that they care about. They're pointing the camera, in a way to give the person an experience, the viewer an experience. So I'm going to give you a couple of kind of things to keep in mind as you do this. So step number one is you want to lead with physical, action and reality. And because that's what we share the most as humans first. I mean, it's sort of the doorway. It's the doorway into giving the reader an experience, is making sure you ground your stories in physical reality. So I often, in my coaching and editing, I ask, people to begin stories, with a significant amount, a few paragraphs at least, of physical reality. This is I'm standing on top of this mountain, and I'm looking over, the edge. You set this up with the physical reality, and that's step one. And then step two is then kind of connecting the emotional part. So after I set up the scene of where physical reality is, I think the next thing that people are ready for at that time then is to connect with their hearts and what's happening for them. So as I peer over the edge of this mountain, I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling empowered. I'm feeling, courageous. I'm feeling whatever's coming up for me. But after you lay that physical groundwork, then connect with the heart and with what's happening for you, and that's actually where you will get the most connection with your reader. And the third step is sort of the head stuff. So in the head stuff, I mean, is sort of the interpretation, your notions about what's going on. So again, step one, I'm on the mountain. I'm seeing this. I'm feeling the cold against my skin. I'm seeing clouds in the distance that are possibly a storm, that kind of thing. Then I connect with my heart. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling courageous. I'm feeling this. And then the third step is any kind of interpretation, which is sort of, when I think about where I am today, I can't believe how far I've come in my life, or I can't believe That's that kind of more head interpretations of your feelings and interpretations of this place you've arrived at in this moment in time. So I'm going to pause there and just know that there's like this layer of physical reality, heart reality, and then head reality. And that's the perfect order for it. And if you do that, and whether you're writing memoir or whether you're writing nonfiction, if you're writing about someone else, you want to try to do something similar to that. I mean, if you're writing about, somebody who hiked across the country or something, I mean, you want to lay the groundwork of the physical reality, try to interpret what might have been happening for them, and then interpret, the head stuff then thirdly. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to shift to a little bit of a different topic, which is identifying the stories of your life. There's one little tool. So a big part about writing is actually narrowing the focus of what you're writing about. I mean, it's, life is big, this world is big, but a good article or a good book has focus, and it's like a smaller slice of pie. I mean, the world and your life is this huge piece of pie, and any piece of writing is really a slice. And so how do you hone your ideas down from all these crazy things that have happened in your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, so how do you start to choose what you're going to write about? Well, when I have an idea for a story, I guess a couple of things come up for me. I start to go into, what's this really about? Last year, my dear pit bull Blue died, and this is sort of an example, and I wanted to write about it, and there was a feeling. I had a lot of feelings about his death, a lot of loss, but then I thought a little bit more. I started to write, started to kind of doodle a bit, and I started to tell the story of his last day, and I realized that the feeling I was wanting to convey was really about loneliness, and Blue had been such a source of companionship for me, and had actually gotten me through some periods of post-divorce and some times of loneliness. And so, I began to write that story and centered it on this idea of loneliness. And so how do you make that shift for you? One way to do it is to, as you start to doodle into a story, to ask yourself, what's this really about? Yes, check in with the feeling you want to convey, and then where does that feeling lead you? Where does it lead? What's the notion or the concept, underneath that feeling? And so there's kind of a tool I want to offer you that all stories, whether it's a book or an article or a blog post, can be boiled down to this kind of this sentence I'm going to say. The story I'm trying to write is a story about X, as portrayed through, my experiences with Y. And so, this is a story about faith as portrayed through my many travels around the world, which is actually the book I'm working on. It's a story about courage as portrayed through the lens of my experiences in my yoga practice and becoming a teacher. The story I'm trying to write is a story about forgiveness as portrayed through my experiences hiking 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. So there's kind of this nexus of identifying the concept, the theme that you're writing about, and then acknowledging that you're gonna filter it through this particular lens, this smaller lens of a particular area of your life, and that's a great way to kind of boil these bigger ideas down, and so narrowing this slice of pie. So I'm going to shift now into the next part of this talk, which is, you know, I want to give you some kind of homework, some exercises to think about in terms of how to identify more stories you want to tell. Step one, I would make a list of your expertises, and we all wear many hats. And you know, maybe you are passionate about sewing. Maybe you are passionate about travel. Maybe you're passionate about being a parent, a mother. Maybe you're passionate about reading. You know, and these expertises, to remember, is you don't need to be the world's greatest expert in something. And, you know, I like to think about, you know, like to be an expert, you know, no one really wants to follow somebody who says, you know, I'm an expert in this and I'm 1,000 steps ahead of you, and I'm going to have to, you know, you're a pain in my neck because I'm so smart and I gotta dumb it down for you. That's not a way to connect with readers. I mean, imagine, you know, in a lot of these expertises, I think of myself as just being 5 steps ahead of someone or 4 steps ahead, you know, and you want to show, you know, your struggles through this stuff. And maybe you are a great expert. I know Mark here as a pilot, and he has incredible expertise about that, but he's also a human being who, you know, who can talk about, you know, becoming a pilot or talk about the struggles of being a pilot. So, you know, all of us, some of us have a lot of expertises about things. We might be a lawyer, and that's a great, you know, write about that. But if you can think of yourself as a human being too, and just being a few steps ahead of somebody, you may have incredible skill as a pilot or a certain profession, but just remember the humanity part of it. So again, this idea of just being 5 steps ahead in your expertise and being able to lead by taking someone's hand and you know, walking them through the experiences you've gone through rather than preaching down at them. And so step one is to list your various expertises, the various hats that you can see yourself as a quote expert in, and own that. I mean, one of the best memoirs of the last, you know, decade or so was a book called Drinking, a memoir, and she was an expert in drinking, and you know, and so she owned that, and it's a hard story to read. It's not a pleasant story, but you know, it's sort of a so be creative in thinking about your expertises too. These aren't just necessarily you know, jobs or you know, things you've acquired a great amount of you know, certificates in or degrees in. This is any area of your life where you can kind of propose yourself as an expert. You know, or you're a hiker. I mean, you may just be a weekend hiker, but you are much more of an expert than somebody in the city who doesn't hike at all. And so just own that expertise. So step 2, you know, make a list of stories that are under each of these expertises. You know, I'm a big fan of lists like this. So you know, under each expertise, maybe write a list of 5 to 10, you know, stories that come up for you that you can tell that kind of grow out of this expertise. You know, and so, and step 3, or the next step then, is to attach a lesson learned to each of these stories. I wanted to add one more thing about the stories. You know, think about the most transformative stories. Often when I make a list of stories I want to tell, there's stories that I live large in my head, and they should be told, but there's also other stories where transformation happened that I can forget about, and maybe the transformation was more subtle. Maybe it wasn't such a big, you know, fireworks kind of an episode for my life. Maybe it was more subtle, but there was a lot of transformation that happened there. So think both about the stories that loom large in your psyche, but then also think about the smaller stories. You know, a moment where you were walking and had a realization. You looked up at the sky and saw, you know, a sunset, and you realize something major about your life at that time. So my point about making that list of stories is not just focus on the big fireworks stories of your life, but anything where some change happened for you. Okay, and then the next step is to attach a lesson learned to each of these stories. And a lesson learned in this kind of writing are your themes. And that's how, when you start to identify the lesson you learned in each of these stories, that's when you can start to kind of figure out what this particular story is about and what's that main idea you're going to wrap around it. Like, for example, that story about my dog's death. I mean, the lesson I learned was that as I thought about that story, was that Blue had taught me a lot about companionship and about loneliness too. And so that led me to then focus that whole piece I wrote about loneliness. And the whole piece then kind of gets filtered through that lens again. So attach a lesson learned and then attach a feeling to it too. So, what's the feeling that you had as you were experiencing this part of your life, and what's the feeling you want to give to your reader? And so, when you do that, then you start to arrive at, kind of a natural selection of the main stories. And you can actually then create almost a calendar for yourself of these are the stories I want to tell. These are the articles I want to write. This is the next book I want to write. You then circle back to this that tool I gave you, which is this book or this story, is about faith as filtered through my travels. It's a story about X as filtered through my experiences in Y. And so I'm going to pause there. There's so much to talk about with this subject, but I want to open it up for some questions here. And I kind of blasted you with a lot of stuff, and maybe next couple of weeks, I'll unpack some of this stuff even further. But go ahead and unmute yourself if there's any questions, and I'd love to hear you. Yeah.
Hi, Brad.
Hey, Mark.
How are you?
I'm well. How you doing?
Excellent. I'm doing well. Listen, thank you very much for doing this. I was just furiously taking notes here. So
good.
Let me ask you this question. I love what you have to say about the analogy of the human experience. And I think the reason you're probably such a good storyteller is with travel writing, you have to take a person to another place, and they want to experience that as a reader. So can you tell me a little more about, or go into that a little deeper about, you take people to a geographical space and then you blend in the emotion there. So with your steps, your first 3 steps, is there somehow you balance that? How do you balance that correctly? That there's not too much, you say, a couple paragraphs about the place, but then you weave in all the emotional. And so I'm just wondering if that, if there's a different way to balance that. I know you know my project a little.
Yeah.
Let me turn this off.
So think about, I guess what's coming up for me is that I'll use an example. I traveled to Palestine several years ago, and I was writing an article about, can you be a tourist in Palestine? And I stayed with a family there, and I chose to begin the article on the rooftop of their house, and because it gave me such a warm feeling about the humanness, and I was in this place that was scary for people. It's a place where a lot of violence has gone on, where people have extreme attitudes, and I wanted to convey the homeliness I was feeling, the humanity I was feeling, the hospitality I was feeling. So I began the article, like, I'm sitting on the rooftop with this wonderful family. I identified the people I'm sitting with. We're eating snacks and drinking this Arab liqueur, and I'm looking around at the mountains in the distance, and so I set that up first, and then I start to say, it may be counterintuitive that I'm writing about Palestine and beginning like this, but I'm having such a profound feeling of being at home here with these people, and then I shift into the thinking part about what's this about? Then I start to identify the article I'm going to write. I'm going to be talking about, the hardness of this place as well as the beauty and the humanity of this place. So I guess to try to answer your question, I think of it like a pyramid. Once you lay that groundwork with, and I really, in my own writing, I literally do this. And often in the first draft, I don't do it well. I'll start writing, and sometimes the emotion and the thinking will come out first. And then I'll look at what I've written, and I don't get overexcited about it. I say, okay, I've got some fodder here to work with. And I go back and how do I lay the scaffolding here for this? So then I go back and say, okay, I led with thinking and feelings here. So let me just write a paragraph or two first about that sets up, the physical circumstances. And that creates this safe entryway for the reader, because, without that physical stuff, there's nothing, the reader isn't in your mind. And so that the problem with leading with the heart and the mind stuff is that you're asking the reader to leap into your mind with you and into your heart with you right away. And it's an impossible thing to do. I mean, some writers pull that off, but as a basic strategy, it's so much better to if you're gazing at mountains, people have gazed at mountains before. And so you're giving them the opportunity to connect with you on just a very basic sensory level. And so one thing to keep in mind with the physical reality part, the base of the pyramid is think of the five senses. It's just, make sure you hit most of them in the setup, I'm sitting on the rooftop, I'm tasting this licorice liqueur, I'm feeling the light warm breeze against my cheeks, I'm eating chocolates, I'm looking into the faces of these Palestinian people, and then and the next level of the pyramid then is the feelings, and how is this making me feel? I'm feeling at home weirdly for being in such an exotic, violent place, and then the top of the pyramid is, and I put it at the top of the pyramid because it's really not necessary to do very much of the thinking work. By the time you've laid the scaffolding, of the physical reality, laid the scaffolding of the emotional reality, you simply need to just write a few sentences saying, I think this is a profound experience for me, and it's going to be an incredible trip. And here's what I'm hoping to accomplish with this trip. And that's all that thinking stuff. It's the top of the pyramid. But lead with the five senses, then the heart, and then the brain and the thinking. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, that's excellent stuff. I'm just writing.
Yeah. And I literally go through that, with all my rough drafts. I mean, it's sort of like I tend to lead often first with all this thinking and feeling, and then I realize, wow, okay, I've got to set the scaffolding up, and that's so I go back and do it in the second draft. So
do it here. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can. Hi, Susan.
I'm still learning how to do this. Sorry. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm thinking, how would you apply those same steps, those same techniques, that same structuring process that you were talking about to telling someone else's story, where you're the onlooker and you're trying to explain that person to somebody else? I mean, because basically I'm a historian, so a lot of what I've done much of my life is write people's stories and tell them in the context of their times. So I just want to play around with that for a little bit and just hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's a good question. And even though your articles or your pieces are about other people, there is an important piece that you want to include about how this person makes you feel. And so there really isn't a lot of difference when you're writing about somebody else. I think I talked about this a bit last week, but there's if you go to a funeral, sometimes you'll hear a eulogy, and it just falls flat. And often, you'll go like, this person just talked about, the facts of this person's life. And they, they said they were born in 1947. They went to this high school, and you go away and you kind of feel disappointed and maybe, like, gosh, I didn't really get to connect with the deceased, in a way. And the eulogies that often, are the most powerful are ones that are filtered through, the lens of the observer, of the person giving the talk. And so there's power when, and so the eulogy might go more like, I met this person in medical school in 1973, and the first time I met her, there was just something that happened for me. I realized she was a special person, and she ended up mentoring me, and over the years, we got into some fights, and we struggled with each other, and then we moved through those, and it deepened our appreciation for each other. And on and on. And so the point I'm making is that there's really power in filtering any story, whether it's about you or about somebody else or about travel, by filtering it through your particular unique lens of seeing the world. And this is what the word voice really means in writing. Voice is not just attitude in writing. Voice is your worldview, and you want to filter all of your writing, whether it's nonfiction about somebody else or some external topic, or whether it's about your own life. You want to filter it through your whole lens of your worldview. And so as you interview the people, I know some about your work, you want to, lead with the facts of their lives. Lead with, if you sit with them, I would lead with, what it's like to be with them, what they look like, what they sound like. This is all that physical reality stuff at the base of the pyramid. Then you might then connect with what it's like to be with them. As you sit with this 99-year-old, person, I feel, you've given me the facts of their life, what they look like, sound like, what it's like to be near them. And then you connect with what it's like to be with them in your heart and your feelings. And they give you a sense of peace, or maybe they give you a sense of fear. Maybe this person is hard for you to be with, but and then the third step is to, move into that kind of more thinking territory about this is what this person's life has meant to them, and what I think my interpretations of what their life has meant. So I guess the central point I want to make is it really is about you as much as it is about them, and the reader wants that. No, they don't want you to take it over and make it all about you like a narcissist, but there's a way in which there's a nice balance between you're writing about a subject, but the reader really wants to know, why you're interested in them, how they make you feel, what you learned from them. And so, in a lot of journalism classes, they tell you not to use the word I, and a lot of my memoir students too, fear that they're using the word I too much, but I is a great word to use. And in your pieces, it depends on your, maybe your editors at the newspapers, or the places you write for too. But, using the word I in a piece about somebody else can be powerful. I mean, this is what this person made me feel like to be with them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's sort of a similar process.
I've already started the one on the 99-year-old lady, and I mean, one of the things that I like what you say about the feeling. I'm already connecting with that, because as you were saying that, I'm thinking, yes, this woman is amazing, but she's also so incredibly vulnerable in the world today, because she's just so out of place in a sense. Yeah. I mean, she comes from landed wealth in England. How does that relate to, people struggling on pensions in America, or with COVID, or with grandkids who never write or call, and trying to make her relatable to my community is going to be interesting.
Right.
So that's why I definitely want to connect with the human emotions. I mean, especially when you're talking about loneliness, because she, this is a woman who had a 47-year-long open marriage,
right,
where she essentially had two husbands. And that's someone who was very, very true to herself. And so I'm really hoping that she'll let me gracefully put that piece in there to just give her that dimension that she kept seeking herself, and she kept being true to herself in a world that would easily see her as a useless socialite.
Right. let me just add that when you tell the reader what it's like to be with her, and you portray that sense of graciousness that she has with you, you're signaling to the reader that she's done this with other people in her life then too. And so they're actually then able to feel why she's had such an impact on other people by you claiming how she's had an impact on you. So yeah, so thank you. Yeah,
it's really fun. But this is very helpful. This makes me think about process and structure and not just content.
Yeah,
and stories are all about content. This is taking me out of my comfort zone, so I'm appreciating it. Thank you very much.
We got time for one more question. Anyone else?
I'm good.
Good. Well, thank you. And I'll be here next week, and I'll figure out my next topic. I'll send a note out to you all, and I appreciate you being here. And hope you have a great week and great weekend. And reach out to me if you have any follow-up questions. I'm happy to send you a quick email or something too. So my email address, which I think you probably all have if you signed up, is brad@bradwetzler.com. So good to see you, Jeff, too. And Jillian, thank you.
Thanks, Brad. That was
all
great.
Right. Yeah, see you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.